Hi guys, welcome to the channel, or welcome back, whichever that may be. You may have already seen from the thumbnail that I will be working on the White Wolf himself, Geralt of Rivia. Now, I timed this video to coincide with the release of Season 2 on Netflix, which is the 17th of December, but this project was plagued with unforeseen circumstances. Well, some were foreseeable, but I thought I could just ignore them or I'd work around them. I was wrong. Please excuse the background. I thought this would be a good idea since, it's Geralt's colour theme. But as it turns out, you can't really see much. I mean, I'm not even convinced anything is happening right now. But I promise you it does change. Anyway, putting that aside for now, as this is going to be a slightly longer video, let's get started. So I'm currently working on the first hand right now. I began with the magic ring and I will slowly continue to work my way up until it's complete before making a second one. Now that the hands are done, I begin on the boots/legs. I like to crochet all in one, as in one continuous piece, instead of crocheting all the parts separately and then sewing them together at the end. I mean, you all know how I feel about sewing, but with my method I only need to crochet 3 of the limbs separately and then I crochet them all together later on with no sewing required. Before I reach the point of no return on the boots, I like to glue a piece of scrap wood that I've carved to shape at the bottom of the sole for stability. And I mean, after all, I do want this to be sculpturesque, so he needs to be able to stand unaided. After the glue is dry, I basically carry on till the upper thigh area before joining the legs together. At this point I will essentially now be working in continuous rounds up the body towards the crown of the head. With both legs attached, it's time to start working on the armature. I'm using some garden wire since it's all I had in stock, some toilet rolls, cut in half, and some kitchen foil. Oh, and the background colour changed, as promised. I swapped out the black felt for grey. After bending the wire to shape, I use the foil as a bulking sort of agent or material, and also to serve as an anchor for the toilet roll centres, which I will secure with hot glue later on. Now it's time to grab some batting and basically start stuffing. When I get close to the neck, it's time to attach the arms, which have their own wire to make them posable. I follow the same process of shaping the wire and covering the hand area with foil, and then wrapping some batting around that for some cushioning. When I was just about to finish the neck area, I received a jury duty summons.
One eternity later.
Okay, so there's been a bit of a time jump. Let me explain. When I got back from jury service, I was running out of time and had ordered the wrong size of safety eyes. Twice. So naturally, panic quickly set in, and to make things worse is that the wrong size of safety eyes alerted me to the fact that I hated the yellow. So when I ordered them a third and final time, I added gold to see which one I'd like better. To me, the yellow eyes seemed soulless and drug-induced somehow, and I mean, they both do, and since it's how they are made, it's a manufacturing thing. There's nothing I can really do about that. However, the gold has a reflectiveness around the iris, which makes them seem better somehow and slightly more realistic. So here I have basically wrapped Geralt up in cling film to protect his body, and then added some masking tape on top so that I can draw on him and get the patterns I require, which are the breastplate, the pauldrons, the gauntlets and the backplate. I do this roughly to get the shape I'm looking for, and will transfer those onto paper to be tweaked and refined later. Once I had carefully cut the pattern off of Geralt, I transferred it onto paper, and from here I could then start to add extra allowances on one side of the gauntlets and also the backplate, which will be cut in half to make the armour removable. At this point though, I was undecided about my method of closure, but taking the time constraints into consideration, I opted for Velcro. Or is it hook and loops? No, Velcro. I used Velcro, so Velcro it is. Not sponsored, not affiliated. I tweaked and refined the pattern off camera, and now it's time for a test fit. I'm basically going to pin the pieces together and see if any final adjustments need to be made, but thankfully there wasn't anything major that needed to be changed. However, up until this point I was working with this reference image, but then for some reason I found this one. At this point I was starting to think that this project was cursed, but anyway I decided not to sweat it, head to my local haberdashery and see what supplies I could use. I end up doing this off camera because it was just a little too fiddly to film, but essentially I did some puff stitches in a row to basically be each pouch for the potion, and then threaded brown ribbon in a T shape to attach onto the belt and wrap around his leg. After all the ribbons and extra detail was added onto the armour, I primed everything with black gesso and then used one of my sculpting tools to add the rivets with some silver paint. The medallion gave me problems too. This is actually the second attempt you're seeing here. The first one turned out to be too big and threw off the scale a little bit. It would have looked like he was wearing a plate around his neck. So I ordered much smaller charms, which were more size appropriate, and proceeded to up. I did the best I could, guys, and I'm sticking to that story. You know what? It's not too bad if you've never seen a wolf before. But in a pinch it will do, and to fully appreciate it you just need to take a step back some more. Now close your eyes. Perfect. So I had to do the sword again too, and you may have noticed earlier that I had a small ball of mixed milliput on the side. Yeah, it turns out that milliput was old and crusty, but I had no time left to order a fresh batch, as even with Amazon Prime it would have been delivered way after the deadline. So luckily I had some Worbla in stock and used that instead. Now, some of you may be asking, why didn't I use polymer clay or air dry clay? Well, one, I don't have a separate oven to bake the clay, and I fancied a pizza from Tesco, so yeah. And two, as anyone who's had the displeasure of working with air dry clay will tell you, it's a pain, takes millennia to dry, and I didn't have any. But as it turns out, Worbla is easy to work with once you get the hang of it. All I did was draw out a paper template, use that to cut out the composite parts of the sword, blast them with a heat gun and stick them together. Basically, Worbla softens and becomes malleable when heat is applied, and when it cools down it returns to its hard plastic state. So really you can be as complicated as you like, but I opted for simplicity and prayed the paint job would at least disguise the lack of detail. I made a wig cap off camera only as a backup plan, but as it turned out I absolutely ended up using it. You see, I had planned to do the hair with a much heavier weight of yarn directly onto the head, as I find that with the thicker yarn you can get away with not using a wig cap, as the sheer volume of yarn would cover any gaps. But at this point you can probably guess what happened next. That's right, I couldn't find the right yarn at my local store, not in white anyway, and ordering online would have taken 1 week of shipping. So I quickly switched gears, took the wig cap, cut up some yarn to the length I needed, with room to trim later on if I needed to, and strung on each strand individually. After that was complete, I then went on to separate each strand into the ply threads, and the yarn I used was a 3-ply. Doing this added volume and created waves in the hair, which I would have preferred to be a bit bigger, but what are you gonna do?
2,000 years later.
And we are done. Well guys, that was a journey in and of itself. I'm pretty happy with the results, although I nearly gave up at least 3 times during this project. I'd like to thank you all for watching and ask that you like, share, yeet the bell button, and even consider subscribing if it's to your predilection. Now, I'll leave you with the thought that plagued me throughout this build. That if I changed his eye colour, took off the armour, made his hair longer, gave him a trench coat and impossibly long sword, I'd have